Good news, you're here just in time. Here's another Laneway Talks.
Hi Elliot, hi Gillian. It's Vincent calling from Laneway Talks, and it's good to have you on the show today. Now, we start off normally with a couple of standard questions, and I'm going to start with Gillian and go, where did you grow up, Gillian? What city, country, where did you come from?
I was born in Greenwich, London, in England. Both my parents British. But I grew up in three provinces of Canada, and then we moved around America. Been in a few states of America, went back to England, and basically lived in quite a few places, went to many different schools, and ended up here in Australia and love it.
I mean, you've obviously had a very extensive, I suppose, experience of different countries there. You've really moved around. Were your parents in, I don't know, the Army, Navy, or what was the story?
My dad was in the Air Force, but at this time he wasn't. He just was a bit of a gypsy, I think, at heart, and liked to move around and experience new places. Very interested in history, and his job allowed him to do that.
That's fantastic.
I was blessed in some ways and not in others when it came to schooling.
What about you, Elliot?
I was born in Wagga Wagga in New South Wales, and on the Thursday before decimal currency came in, and then Mum and Dad brought me up in Sydney, and so that's
so an Australiana musician, through and through. Well, Gillian, tell me a little bit about your background in music. Did you even have any background in music?
Well, look, I grew up with a very musical family. I guess, music was everything, like, in our house. Both my parents were terrific singers, terrific dancers, both of them. And my mother actually sang with Dave Brubeck at one stage. And they taught me to sing, but they came from the era where, they didn't really believe there was a career in music or drama or that kind of thing. So,
well, we're about to set them straight on that, aren't we?
Yeah. So, my mum's thrilled. Well, so is my dad in a lot of ways. But, it was all about academics and getting a job and be able to support yourself and pay your rent or your mortgage, So I followed a different path for many years.
So it's not as if you're a guitarist or a drummer or a keyboard player or anything like that?
No, but I write songs in my head.
Yeah.
I hear the tune, I hear the melody, I hear the lyrics.
Yep.
And then I'm just blessed that I've got somebody
who you can transfer that to. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Elliot, what about yourself?
I started playing guitar in 1979, 1980, I think it was. And
how old were you, Elliot?
I think I was 13. And it sort of came, but I'd been mucking around with tape before that, because back in 1970, Dad had all these old records of Glenn Miller and things like that, and the big bands, and I think he sort of got Jack of having to turn the record over every 18 minutes. So what he did, he bought a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and we slowed it down, and he showed me how to transfer the records onto the tape so we could have a tape on continuously for 3 hours, while we're around the house. So
fantastic.
I was sort of supporting things pretty early, from even before I started school, really.
So when you were starting out like that, like, let's go back to when you're 13, you're picking up a guitar, you're experimenting. Yep. But what type of music came to mind? I mean, what did you like at the time?
I think a couple of early singles that I bought was like Ebony Eyes by Bob Welsh, the Let's Stick Together album.
Okay, yeah, know it well.
Yep, that was stuff that I thought that sounds cracking, I think
there's always something, Elliot, that you can always remember throughout your musical career. And so, for example, for me, it would be probably listening to the first Kiss record when nobody knew about them, and we played that thing to death. But then it came to Judas Priest, the second album, Sad Wings of Destiny, and the particular sound, whatever, everybody's different what they like, but it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I kind of obviously followed that flavour. Now you're talking about Bob Welsh, right? Yeah, and that's a completely different. It's a real Americana sound with Bob.
Yeah, well, but at the same time, I'd be listening to say Roxy Music albums, and I just thought it was just so atmospheric and big, and and I think around that time, Trevor Horn's production was getting hitting the airwaves. With Frankie Has the Holly, and Grace Jones plays to the rhythm, and all of a sudden, I think a drum kit stopped sounding like a cardboard box. And it sounded like it was recorded in a castle, and so I fell in love with those really big atmospheric sounds, especially with Roxy Music, where Andy Mackay could play one note on the soprano saxophone and just make you melt, you know what I mean?
I tend to, you're already giving us a flavour of where you're coming from, and which would probably start to be reminiscent of your style. And then, so what, let's go and say, well, what was your first band, where did you go to? So what was your first band that you actually started or joined or whatever?
First band I started was when we were 15, I think, and we really sucked. Our band was called Ground Level, and we started up near Hornsby in Sydney. And anyway, there was two guitarists, a bass, and drums, and we practiced our little hearts out every weekend in a mate's dad's carpet factory, and then all of a sudden we were supporting the Oils, the Divinals, the Angels, because they thought we were little guys who were still sounded all right, and we were getting some really, really good shows, and so for the next 2-3 years we were cracking, and I think our parents were a bit worried because it was the last 3 years of school, and you should be concentrating on your studies, and we were out playing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. But anyway, then one day I think our drummer got a call, and the next thing he's in the Machinations, and then a month later he's calling us from Madison Square Garden. He's on drums for Icehouse. So our band folded after that, and I went on to other bands, and all the other boys went on to get normal jobs. But I carried on and went into other bands from there.
Gillian, what about yourself?
I didn't really look. I was in a band in high school with some really good musicians, and we were actually being managed by Paul McCartney's sister.
Yeah,
and she was very interested, Ruth McCartney, in taking us all the way, kind of thing. And it was kind of strange living in Los Angeles because everybody was in a band, everybody was just getting on with their lives. I went to school with Slash, I went to school with Tommy Lee's sister, so I was kind of hanging around with all those kind of people.
So it was basically, you're in a sense living and breathing music when you start naming names like that.
Music. And even the boys from Poison were renting our garage.
Oh, wow.
When they arrived in Los Angeles from, I think it was Philadelphia, their van broke down. So it was pretty crazy scene. And then I got a boyfriend who was Australian, and he was actually supporting Judas Priest, Motley Crue, Kiss, the bands you just named. And that's what ended up bringing me to Australia. So I gave away my dreams and moved here. But then I started working in the music industry here behind the scenes for companies like Kevin Jacobson's. And
oh, yeah.
So I was living music. I wasn't fulfilling my own dream, if that makes sense.
Well, there's nothing.
I ended up getting I was a bit shy, to be honest. I had staged terribly.
Well, I think I probably did a similar type of thing. if you're a musician, I think if you're a real musician, you do dream, you dream of success. And I dreamt like everybody else, but I got involved in the business side of the music industry, and I consider myself extremely lucky that my whole working career has been music and entertainment. And so I took that path and didn't take the path of being a professional musician, which is all I dreamt about. But I say to many people, it's been fascinating also on that side.
Of course. And I think by watching people who I was inspired by and being around people, it helped me in my later years fulfill my dream. But working on the industry side, it certainly helped. I think both Elliot and I, in a business sense, as far as knowing how to book gigs and knowing how to send promo and knowing how to, do follow-up, do contracts, those kind of things. Whereas
I think when you look at SideShow Annie, it does come out because, your videos are exceptional quality, the songs are, exceptional, and just your ability to make sure you're on the social media, it's happening. And there is so many artists that say to me at times, I don't do social media. And my answer to that is, well, it will be a 1 in a trillion shot that you make it. You must be on social media. And social media is our marketing and promo that we did in the 70s and 80s. It's just transferred.
Yeah.
So you're doing, I think, very well.
Even back then, like knowing that every Monday I had to send the gig guides to the bands, and get them in for the Wednesday. All of those things stay with you, even. So I think that's helped us immensely.
You must, for everybody listening, when you get to social media and you're doing it like yourselves on a professional basis, social media posts need to happen, whether it be through YouTube or YouTube community or shorts or stories or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. You must have a schedule, and you cannot give up that schedule. It must happen like clockwork, and it is about getting to that audience on a regular basis. You cannot disappear for a while. So I think that fares well for you guys that you had that background, Gillian, and have been able to apply it. Well, Elliot.
Admittedly, I haven't done TikTok yet. I've heard that it's more for the younger people, but I don't know.
With all due respect to TikTok, I've been reading in the paper, I think it's going to be banned soon, isn't it? Because it's Chinese owned or whatever. That was my understanding, is because they're collecting data. And we had a discussion about this in the office a couple of weeks back, that what should we do? Because there is all this talk of the US, getting to the point of banning TikTok and whatever, and will that happen here? And you start to delve in more, and the Chinese government's involved, and is all that. But what kind of data are they getting? Is it the data they're getting off there of any value anyway? Who cares? And it's probably a discussion, a bigger discussion, which we'll have on a later show, social media. But Elliot, I want to ask you a question. So, when did you consider that you'd gone professional?
I was in the early 20s, and I was sort of Dad told me I've got to get something behind me. So I went to uni, dropped out after 3 months, and then did an electrical trade and did electronics certificate at night. And so I was working in the air conditioning game until I finished my trade, but still playing 2 or 3 nights a week. And as soon as I got my ticket, I quit. And at that point, I felt like I was a full-time musician. And I tell you what, for the first, for a long time, you're poor as church mice, and you're living on 2-minute noodles. And, if you get $100 on your credit card, it takes you 6 months to pay off.
I'm still living on 2-minute noodles. What are you talking about?
Yeah. So the thing was, I think early on, a lot of my mates were playing in cover and concept shows, And right from ground level days back in 1981, 82, if my guitar teacher showed me a new chord, I'd go home and I'd move that up and down a fretboard and make a song with it, write lyrics to it. And the band said, "You're the songwriter." And from then on, I've written songs. And I've always found a value in creativity and, in not just getting up and parrot fashion copying somebody else. And I know that's most of the Australian pub music scene, but to be able to pepper it with a couple of your own songs and then look around sometimes and have somebody singing the lyrics to your song in the audience, or a couple of people are wearing your shirts, it makes your year, it makes your day, you know.
Well, Elliot, tell me, when you did go professional, or when you considered, when you got your ticket, whatever, who were you playing with?
At the time, I was playing with a Sydney band called Carnival of Lost Souls. It was sort of
know them well.
They were across. I think John Hamilton had just left and gone to Jenny Morris band.
Yeah, and
I was asked to fill in for him. And the Carnival of Lost Souls was doing like a crossover between Erasure, dance music, and meets Billy Idol kind of thing. Steve Stevens kind of playing. So we're sort of like doing the funky disco stuff, but with the heavy guitar lines as well. And then I moved on to Prestige Fix, which did quite well. It was more of a Cure sound.
Yeah.
And then Matt finished. Oh, sorry, Images, then Matt finished. I think with Images, we actually ended up getting signed to Peter Dawkins, the BMG Group, and Warner's Publishing. And that sort of and that went on for quite a while.
And that would have been the Matt Finish second generation or third generation.
That's right, yeah. So I think I was the last lineup to actually play with Matt.
Yeah.
And tour with Matt.
Yeah.
And write with Matt. So we wrote an album together that never saw the light of day. I think we all had a fallout. That was a very, very gifted individual, but very challenging socially.
Did John Pryor ever release it?
No. He and Matt had gone separate ways at that point. But John and I, and at the turn of this century.
What a shame that you get that happening. You recorded a record that never saw the light of day.
But I saw that it was going to be... John and I did some work together, and we were putting together a Yes concept show, actually. But the thing was, it was getting in the way of SideShow Annie. So I dropped it.
You were also in a band called Skinny for a while.
Yeah. We had some success on Double J or Triple J.
Yeah.
Back in the late 80s, Skinny. That was quite indie. You know, I was still getting my chops together up until the late 80s. You know.
What I can kind of see is, if you have a look, okay, Matt Finish was, I suppose, your Australian pub rock band, but if I go through those other musical influences of yours, and then I put that across your guitar playing, I really do see your guitar playing as it's your classic American MOR. Let's call it Fleetwood Mac or all that kind of stuff. That's where, to me, that's where you sit. Your influences are actually a little bit left of centre from there.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, or would you say no? Hold on a minute.
Yeah, very, very much so. And I think there was a time, like when I was growing up, when all my mates were into blues music, like Hendrix, Zeppelin, and things like that, and that I was more interested in Roxy music. You know, like probably a little bit more. I don't know, maybe more glam.
Yeah.
And when Kiss Alive 1 was out and Dynasty later on, I just I love those albums. You know, I wore Alive 1 out.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, like a lot of us. Yeah, like a lot of us. I mean, I'm a little bit eclectic. You know, I can go across. I absolutely love jazz rock, and one of my favourites being an Australian band called Crossfire, which is Jim Kelly on guitar.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan, but then I'm there with Kiss, you know, or Judas Priest, but early Judas Priest, or I'm there with Glenn Hughes or Trapeze. You know, I mean, and that's what makes the music industry so fantastic, is everybody has such different tastes, that it gives everybody an opportunity to delve into their particular taste. Gillian, tell me, at the moment with SideShow Annie, SideShow Annie, for everybody, have quite a few records out, and I'm looking at them all here, and there's 4 or 5 albums there. And what are you feeling like in your development from when you started with Elliot, and starting to put SideShow Annie together, and that first record or your first recordings, to what you're doing now? What's the development been like?
I think we've had a few lineup changes, not because we've wanted to, but just because people have changed, passed away, that kind of thing. So when you're working with different people as well, you're kind of influenced by what they can bring to the table also, and what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So I think, when we started, it was just Elliot and I. We didn't actually have a band. And when we won a songwriting competition, we decided to make an album. But as I said, it was just the two of us. So we used one of Elliot's friends from BMI, Eddie Hansen, and he produced it. And so the first album was very polished.
There was no doubt. I could put your first album in the comparisons of Eagles. To me, the flavour of it was the Eagles. So, as you said, very polished, quite overproduced. There was a lot in there,
Yes. So it was a bit different than what I heard it when we started writing it, if you know what I mean. But we didn't have our own studio then. We were both working day jobs at that stage.
Yeah.
And then as we moved into our own studio and started recording ourselves and had the girls join the band, it became a bit more blues and roots, more rock and everything. And then we had Lindsay Cabot for a long time, from the Choir Boys, who was our drummer.
Yeah.
Which was fantastic. And we had so many good times. I mean, we toured Japan. We got to do so many amazing things. But now, with the two boys, Dave and Matt, I'm finding we're going back to a more rock sound, a more classic rock sound.
Yeah, I think you'd be right in saying that.
And I like it. I'm happy there because, I like all kinds of music. You're talking about Kiss. I must have played God of Thunder over and over again in my basement as a young girl. And I've always loved big rock bands. But I also, in saying that, I also love Patti Smith, and I love Marianne Faithfull, and I love Janis Joplin, and I love Heart, and I go all the way back to Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald. Those are really my influences.
I think I've found with your voice, Gillian, from the beginning up until these latest couple of tracks, especially the latest one, Hell or High Water, is that you're actually pushing your voice even further, and it's actually becoming a bigger voice, and it's quite obvious that you're pushing it a lot harder. And it really is developing into a really powerful vocal.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that's definitely happening with what you got. So, Elliot, how have you found, what's your opinion on the development from the first recordings up till today?
Absolutely. From a technical point of view, I noticed we used to be using some Neumann condenser mics, which are very detailed. And I've had to pull back and move to some Roya Rubins on Jill's voice because it sort of like captures that more old school sound, which is what we're after. And it just sort of meets up with her voice beautifully. And Jill's just got one of those voices that it's just developed to a point where half the time she doesn't need the PA system.
Yeah. So, from, if you look at the latest, we're using a voice box. That's old school. There is no doubt. I think a lot of young kids probably have never seen a voice box used before. But even I think the Wow Wow pedal isn't as popular as it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then the types of guitars that are used too, where that sound comes from. Have you changed the kind of guitar that you use to give it a different sound over the years where you I've seen this so many times where some guitarists, I don't know, might start with a Les Paul and, the guitar they're using today is so different from a Les Paul, it's unbelievable, and they never go back to that. I've seen others that have stuck with Les Pauls or SGs their whole life. But how have you gone that way?
Something has definitely changed there in the way we write, especially because we've gone from a 2-guitar band down to a 1-guitar band. I've sort of, for the most part, ditched the Gibson 175, like the Steve Howe, the jazz box, and with humbuckers on it, and a Les Paul, which has humbuckers. Those have taken a back seat to a couple of old 70s Strats that we've purchased. They sort of just have the right feel and right sound, real zing in the chords. They're not too creamy. They're really spank almost like a Telecaster, but at the same time rip out a lid. And you listen to a lot of the old classic solos by Jimmy Page, from Zeppelin, and that was like done on Fender guitars. And I just find that the sound seems to cut, and really it works with Jill's voice a lot better now, rather than a really big fat sound. We have a more spanky and cutting sound, I think, and I think the Strat itself has a very almost sweet, throaty sound about it as well. And so we've almost changed to that exclusively for everything we've done of late.
It's a significant change when you say they have gone right to the Strat. It's a different sound.
Yeah.
I just want to now divert a bit and talk about the technique of what you're delivering, what you're releasing. So I say to everybody now, the old system of we will record an album and we will put out 3 singles. It's usually a 2, I suppose, more up-tempo, and then we go with a ballad. All that kind of is gone out the window. It means nothing to us at Laneway anyway. It is about being in the ears and in the face of your audience on a monthly basis. We do say 6 weeks being the longest you should wait between drinks when you're releasing titles. How have you been able to come to grips with this? Because if you are to produce and record an album, by the time you get it out, let's say it's another year, you might as well write your obituary because everybody's forgotten about you. So how are you coping with this new change?
We think it's fantastic.
So you're having no issues writing?
No.
No, at any one time, Jill's got 700 melodies and lyrics on her iPhone ready for me to work together with her on. And the boys sometimes will organise a writing weekend, and the other 2 boys will come around, and the 4 of us will jam something out. And so we like to have their input as well.
Yeah.
And so we've actually got a backlog of about 18 songs that are sort of demoed but not fully recorded yet. So we're just but the hardest thing for us is because our video production team, which is Paul Aitken, who is totally awesome, he's out at Lithgow and he's working with 2 or 3 other projects as well, and he's had a couple of health issues, so it's sort of we've been stretching it probably to about 12 weeks. Sorry, for our output. So,
it does happen, but the principle's there, isn't it? That you're putting songs out on a very regular basis, and if you start to look at the streams, I mean, the business is as hard as it's ever been, and sometimes I suppose I do get artists who say, "How come my streams are not up?" And I think to myself, "Gee, how could I answer that? My name's not Mandrake the Magician."
I think you said right. In the years ago, I read a thing with Trevor Rabin, who was the new guitarist of Yes, and they put out Owner of a Lonely Heart, that album, in '83, and it went number 1 around the world. And then it took them 3.5 years to put the next album out, and he said everybody had forgotten about him.
Absolutely.
And I never
Absolutely.
did that. And when you brought that up about doing singles regularly, it just made perfect sense to Jill and I.
Well, you know what? There is a lot of technical techniques that you must now manoeuvre around in the digital world, and it's humongous. I live and breathe my music, and at midnight at night I'm checking things out on social media. First thing I do when I get out of bed in the morning, and I'm a very early riser, is I check the streams on various artists. Okay.
Yeah.
And so there's so much that goes into it. Now, if I have a look at you guys, you've finally started to crack 1,000 streams on certain songs, and some people may say, "Well, that's not a lot." Well, the line in the sand we'll use Spotify, okay, for all intents and purposes. The line in the sand is 1,000 streams. Until you get to 1,000 streams, you are considered, well, nothing's happening. There's no real interest, and you're just putting your music out. So the algorithms will not pick up anything. Now that's a fact, right? They won't pick up anything. As soon as you hit 1,000, and they had to draw the line somewhere, so it's 1,000, and that's when the algorithms will actually take note and will actually place you in a few places if you're lucky, okay?
Yep.
And so I start to look at your streams, and you're starting to crack that 1,000, and that does show, you know, for the younger artists out there, how hard it is. I do see a lot of the younger artists who put out a song, they've only had a couple of songs out, and they've got 100,000 streams. Yes, we could get all our artists 100,000 streams, but that would be on fake playlists. Okay, so your playlist is your radio station of today. Radio don't break hits anymore, so radio's useless to us all. But a playlist is your radio station, so they go into those fake playlists and they think that, well, I'll get on there and I'll get all these streams and then the algorithms will pick me up. Well, no, the algorithms are also built so that if you're getting the fake playlists, because the individual streamers behind them don't have any substance behind them, and the algorithms go and look for that. So it's so easy to pick them. And so therefore they see it as, in a sense, just bots, and you don't get into the algorithms. It's about being genuine. And so I've seen some of yours now starting to hit 1,000, and that's what needs to continue to try and get something to viral. I've even noticed, like, one of your instrumentals has hit over 1,000, Canasta. And isn't that amazing, where an instrumental song can still do so well in a rock band?
Yeah.
You know, and it amazes you where it's coming from. So, and, you know, there's several other techniques which we obviously don't talk about, in general, because we don't want everybody else using them. But, you know, there is this whole new way of delivering your music, and as we say, it's delivering it monthly or every 2 months or whatever. You must have a video, and videos are so much easier to make nowadays than they were 20 years ago. They're all affordable. There's no real huge cost involved at all. And artwork and everything that goes with it. And I think that you guys have been able to bring it from, just starting out and not a lot happening because there was no real streams there, to a situation where we're starting to get to those thousands, and there's this continual music happening. Some of the videos, of course, have done extremely well, but the videos don't cross over. I mean, have you noticed that?
What do you mean?
Well, when you have a video that has 20 or 30 or 40,000 streams, it doesn't cross over to audio, to Spotify, Apple Play, Deezer. And it doesn't cross over. It does not work. So when we're pushing a video, we're pushing it, yes, of course, to try and substantiate the audio, but it is so hard to get it to come across to there. So it still is what's funny about that? It's still about the audio, the song. Think about that. It's still about the song with a backup from a video. It's not the other way around. And it still comes back to your songs, and it still comes back to, very much so, a accessible song. We never use the word commercial at Laneway Music because we're not a commercial kind of label, but an accessible song, and an accessible song being one that's, I suppose in the old terms, let's go back to the 50s, it's a toe tapper, but that someone can remember. And you do get so many of the new tracks that are out. I've noticed, because we have a Triple J latest releases playlist on Laneway, and if you go through and listen to that, and it's renewed every week, and you start to listen to what's happening out there with a lot of these new young artists, there is definitely an indie rock feel coming back in, as opposed to, say, 3, 4, 5 years ago, where you were listening to songs that were essentially, I could never remember them because it didn't have a kind of a rhythm in them. They're just these, songs. And it's definitely coming back, and you can really hear it. And it's those rock riffs, but in an indie, with an indie fashion or with some form of alternative feel to it, which is really important because you need to develop. So there's some fantastic things going on in music. I think it's all open for artists like yourselves and young artists to develop their careers and have the potential to viral where possible.
There's a funny thing happening at the moment as well, is the whole revolution with artificial intelligence is within music, within art, within video clips. And it seems to be that I'm sensing that especially younger people, they can smell it a mile away, and that a lot of them like something that's real.
I don't disagree. I've been seeing all those articles on AI and YouTube videos to come across it, and how it could potentially start writing songs and all that. Well, look, as much as yes, it will happen. There is no doubt it will happen, because it's all progress, but I believe in the human side of it, and that gives it the individual flavour and colour. And I think we won't get away from that anyway. That's what I believe, and and it's what we believe at Laneway Music about creativity from human beings. I'm not opposed to anything else if people want to use robots or AI to make music and be creative in that sense, but that's not what we do, and we don't want to go down, that's not where we are. It's hard. I think the closest we'll get to is, sequencing and things like that. But outside of that, it's still about you sitting down, Elliot, and coming up with an idea, or Gillian giving you some lyrics and you then putting some music to it. It's two human beings interacting. So anyway, I think we've got a bit of a rundown on today on SideShow Annie, and we look forward to a lot more new tracks coming our way from you guys. Hell or High Water is the latest song out, and everybody should get a dose of that. There's a fantastic video out on our channel, but you get it across all YouTube, of course, and across all digital DSPs. Your music is out, and there'll be plenty more coming. As we just talked about, every month or every 2 months, a new track coming out. Okay, guys, thanks for talking to us, and we hope to talk to you again probably in 6 months' time, because we'd like to see what else has come out and where you've been and where you've gone. Okay?
Thank you, Vince, and thanks to the listeners for joining us, and thanks for your support. Really appreciate it.
Oh, look, it all comes from the creativity from the artist to begin with, and that has never changed. To the industry in general, I get very angry when I see majors who are living in Taj Mahals, and they are created by the artists, and it's as if they're doing the artist a favour, where it's the artist doing them a favour. And we've got to make sure that the artist is in control at all times, and that's what we try and promote at Laneway Music. It's about the artist. The artist creates the industry, and they're the creative people, and that's where it all starts from. But, of course, we'll get different opinions from the people who are driving those Maseratis. Anyway, All right, we'll talk to you guys later, and we won't be too controversial, will we? Because you might be signing to BMG or Sony one day. All right. Okay. All right, guys. Talk soon, okay?
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Ben.
Bye. Bye, Jill.
Bye.
And there it is, another Laneway Talks. If you enjoyed that, there's more. Just search Laneway Talks for more great conversations.